So, perspective is probably one of the most powerful tools a dungeon master can have. Welcome, friends and adventurers. I'm M. Welcome to the DM table. Today we'll be talking about how to use perspective as a tool that a dungeon master uses to produce greatest results of simulation in their campaigns. You see, perspective I'm talking about here is not just player perspective, which you can sort of look through. I'm talking about all kinds of personal perspective. And why is this perspective so important? Is because you can sort of budget your scenes towards the perspective that is necessary. At first, for example, when you're preparing a scene, you can take the perspective of your players and see what is necessary in the scene for them to get what the scene is about. What is the most purposeful thing there, then the next, until you have populated the scene sufficiently enough so that you feel that if you were the player and didn't know anything else before, that your idea for a scene would make immediate, astounding, direct result that you wanted, that it works, that it lights up inside of a mind of an observer. So that when scene is unfolding, that they can get it quite fast and cleanly, because we want our scenes to be as quickly as possibly understood when they are unfolding, and then we can add descriptions that make them more flared out with decorative elements. After all, if the player is seeing the scene immediately, they are forming it in their own mind better than if there's confusion. We do not want confusion, because confusion makes a scene different than what we've made it. Therefore, we look through perspective and then we build from within the perspective. We create a perspective that the player will be able to have by having concisely powerful motives and descriptions that hit the spot. And we want to train how to both narrow them down and generalize them so that the thing is immediately recognizable, so that the mind can latch on and create an image first opportunity. And then we can add sufficient detail, then we can add sufficient polish, so that the thing leads to another scene, another thought, another day, another time. But immediate scene is important, and therefore we go into the perspective. So, about the budgeting of the scene, well, you need quality yet conciseness so that people can interact with the scene. After all, you are their eyes, their nose, their hands, their everything, all of their senses, and you need to act like it. So, you need to present. You need to present things that people feel very immediately. From those informations, they should have the ability to make conclusions, decisions, and act. And they should be able to act dynamically, because the session is about as good as it is fluid and accessible for all sorts of plans and fun and everything that people want to do. So if you have this task, which you do, to present the senses, you want to budget them so that they, as if in a video game, they present playable grounds that sort of invite attention and ability towards things that can be solved, can be done, and can be thought up. Also, they draw attention to your story. They draw attention to what players are supposed to think about the scene, what they're supposed to think about the people, traps, walls, towers, whatever it is that's there. You want to get their mind going, not just their eyes, so that they think what this contributes to the world, so that they can remember, so that they can act on it. After all, good scenes are connected to everything else. They prove things in the world, they present things in the world, they remind later players about things in the world when they remember them because they were important. So that's why we budget these, because we don't want unimportant scenes to take up time, take up space, take up description. We want to go into scenes and things that create flow, create importance, create description. And therefore, we budget them. Now, a good DM tries to do some of this ahead of time. because you sort of want to plan for your players so that they have fun. So you want to predict how they're gonna have fun. So you want to go into the player's mind, in your mind's eye, and imagine what each player will try to do. And you can sort of try to know this, not entirely, but you can try to know this through their goals. Their goals as players, their goals as people that play, not their character goals, just because you want to know, want to perceive what they're pursuing. If somebody wants to appear like an interestingly powerful warrior, you want people in the scene to react to this powerful, interesting warrior, right? If somebody wants to be perceived, well, I have an episode on player roles and recognizing it, but you want to recognize both player role and player purpose, because player is there to do something. If player wants to do something, you don't want to over much stick them in something that they don't want to do at the time, so you want to predict their desires so that the world comes forth and gives them opportunities for their desires to be furthered and so on. But it's not all about the player. You also want to do this with your world. You want to go into the mind of your world and see how would they achieve to do this scene so that it's realistic from their standpoint of their motives, their goals, their resources, their backgrounds, and so on, so that it's realistic. And yet, the scene was thought up first from, well, reasons of being good, being tasteful to players and DM alike, scene that leads to great achievements, adventures, enjoyment, emotions. So you first thought up what is really cool, then you thought up how it was possible in the end, even if you had to go through all kinds of twisty paths of logic to achieve this sort of thing. And that's how some good world building actually happens. But yeah, in this case, I just want to give an example how you would get to it. You would try to simulate from inside the minds of your people, your players and your non-players. You also want to go from resources, but that's less important. You can sort of find resources for what you need when you need it. Eventually, you just need value and purpose. Value and purpose of your scene. Their value is how much this is a wonderful thing for people to witness. You know, your party members that you're DMing to, and how great a scene that is for them. That's value, and purpose is what does it do to convey the rest of the situation, to convey further story, to convey further questing. Where do you go from there? What does it contribute? What does it contribute towards the motion of the situation at large? Where does it take you? Well, you don't have to pre-predict all of this, of course, but occasionally keeping an eye out gives you the ability to have a cool path here and there and mostly everywhere, just one at a time instead of, hundreds at a time. But players will always feel like there are hundreds because you will be DMing hundreds of paths and then enhancing ability of few of those paths that players take into greatness and further paths. Again, something that is important is to make the scene triumphant in some way that makes it worth it even when it's originally something small. Again, I have an episode, I know, I have so many and yet so few watch them, but I hope you will. Anyways, enhancing even the small things into greater heights, and I don't mean necessarily by raising stakes too much or doing drama, I mean just making it all fit so well, so purposefully into players' desires, into player actions, into world, into everything that's important to everyone around the table, both you and the players, makes it all valuable, and then describing it in a awesome manner makes it triumphantly described, which is what I talked about in the Triumph episode. Anyways, that's how you apply what you have learned from perspective. But let's get back to the perspective itself. We prepare the scene, as said, but we make it efficient enough, again, as said. Then note and know that you'll be there when it unfolds, therefore you'll be able to sort of retread the description if need be. And what I mean by this, and this is very important, and half of the work is done here, once your players are in the scene, you do what you have planned and then see the reactions and see whether you need to grease it up further, whether you need to make the thing flow further by your, well, adjustments, whether it was sufficient, whether people got it, and if they didn't, well, it's easy. You're a narrator in something that is happening right then, so you can narrate further. You can add to it. You can re-describe it again. You can emphasize. You can return to subject when people go off subject. You can remind. You can focus. You can stir the direction so that people see what they are missing to see if they didn't see it. And you know this by observing their reactions. And sometimes if people are quiet, you can ask them what they think about it. From within the campaign, you can ask, what are you thinking on this? What are your thoughts? What are you planning? What is to follow that you have thought up? And if players don't understand, remind them that you need to know. As a DM, you might sometimes need information, and it is all right to ask directly for players telling you what they think in character, what is their inner monologue, what is their inner proceedings on the matter, what are they planning, because you need this information occasionally, and this is extremely valuable information, because then as a DM you can arrange things to better fit into reality of the narrative. You can better polish it into what story players are expecting and what story you're expecting, as opposed to misunderstandings and going into two different directions and then realizing later that nobody got anything from it because nobody understood what was being pursued. So this way you can avoid that, and indeed, importantly, you can keep using perspective now with hands-on knowledge of what that perspective is during the actual situation, to further the goal of the whole scene and everything else that you need to further the goal of, like players succeeding to find something, or you just succeeding to produce a further story well, and yet to provide for player freedom in quite the total manner, in full totality, because you won't be railroading them unless that's your preference, but I do it all the time without any railroading, because why would I need to? I just follow the tracks they lay and make all kinds of train stations and leave the railways to them. So that's really why perspective is such a powerful tool. And don't forget, when you respond to player stuff that they want in the way they want, you now want to see how is that done from the perspective of your world, again in real time, as well as in pre-production and even in post-production, because you want to think on this after sessions and see what you can see. So how do the people of your world and how does the environment react to player action, player inaction, player presence, and so on? What is their perspective? What do they see? This is important. What does a non-player character see when they see a player? How do they see them? This is important for realism. If you want, living world, you will want to see how do your non-player characters see your player characters. How do they react to their each appearance? Not just first time when they meet them, but on their every sentence and situation. It's not a hard thing. Just remember their background, remember their feelings, remember their goals, and just roleplay them. Roleplay them inside yourself. You don't even have to fully roleplay them out to the players as much to yourself. You want to see them as if you were in a vision of watching a movie, like when you're dreaming that you're watching a movie and you're understanding the roles better than you would have if you were awake, in a way. Has that ever happened to you? Anyways, so you want to see what these roles think about each other and how do they interact, and then predict a bit through this perspective what will happen in the future, and therefore make good content throughout. Well, adventurer, I hope this was entertaining and unique for you, and if it was, I hope you can spare me a click, because if you do, maybe I could see you here next and every week, and I wish you luck on your adventures. Until next time, bye.